So I keep hearing that Trae Young about to get traded. You feel me? I don't know who he about to get traded to. God damn, it's cold in this motherfucker. I'm about to play the video. I don't know who he about to get traded to, but hit the like button if you fuck with Trae Young. You feel me? Because I fuck with Trae Young. I've been watching him since he was in high school. You feel me? And he been a bucket, but yo.
A tremendous opportunity for Atlanta. I think the possibility of trade talks, including Trae Young, are very real too. That #1 overall pick now for the Hawks gives them a chance to bring in an impact player if they decide to maybe go younger.
And the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft goes to the Atlanta Hawks? You gotta be joking me. I mean, this team had a 3% chance of winning the draft lottery. The Detroit Pistons are literally punching air right now. This is the second year in a row where they had amongst the highest odds to get the #1 overall pick, only to get screwed with the #5 overall pick. But now that the Atlanta Hawks got the #1 overall pick, there's a huge question of what their plans might be. And one of the prevailing rumors that this organization has is trading Trae Young. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, do the intro.
Alright, fam. See, we ain't come for all this extra ass shit, fam. Then he giving up. See what I'm saying? Sponsorships and shit. We just gonna skip the ride here.
Today, then I have some news for you. The Atlanta Hawks were able to win the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft, despite them having a 3% chance of doing so. I know Pistons fans, it sucks. This is the second year in a row it happened to you. But what's important here isn't the fact that the Detroit Pistons lost 28 games in a row and still didn't get the #1 overall pick. No. The important part about this is the fact that there are big changes coming to the Atlanta Hawks this offseason. The moment they've won the 2024 NBA draft lottery, the futures of some of their biggest names in recent history were put on the hot seat, including their franchise cornerstone for over the past half-decade.
This is a tremendous opportunity for Atlanta. I think the possibility of trade talks, including Trae Young, are very real too. That #1 overall pick now for the Hawks gives them a chance to bring in an impact player if they decide to maybe go younger and start rebuilding this group.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are presenting...
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Them trading Trae Young would definitely make sense simply because of the fact that, fam, when has the Hawks... Okay, let me say this. I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but I know about the playoffs, the NBA playoffs. I don't remember the last time the Hawks was in the playoffs. I cannot lie. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section, but I don't remember the last time the Hawks was in the playoffs. For real.
Presented with two completely different options for the Atlanta Hawks now that they're in this situation. Option A is obviously the more fun one to talk about, and that's if they traded Trae Young. Trae Young is a 3-time All-Star point guard who's had trade rumors circulating around him all season long. I mean, how many times have you seen me Photoshop Trae Young into a Los Angeles Lakers jersey? Please! For the love of God, we really could use some help, basketball gods. Man, over the past 2 years, we've been going through hell as Laker fans. I just need some delusional hope, so forgive the Trae Young photoshops. But with yesterday's lottery's results in, originally I was thinking that maybe the Atlanta Hawks were going to just draft the best player available, pair him with Trae Young, and call it a day. But now, some people are speaking a completely different tune. What if this is the...
Come on. Why the fuck are we buffering this shit, man? Let me go on 720. Because what the fuck are we buffering for?
The Atlanta Hawks trying to blow it all up and start from new. There are some people that are already going as far as to begin speculating on who exactly some potential trade partners could be, almost as if it's a foregone conclusion that Trae Young is leaving Atlanta. The most popular option that's always thrown in there is without a doubt the San Antonio Spurs, primarily because they have a ton of cap space and an absolute treasure chest of assets. But in the case of the Atlanta Hawks, the San Antonio Spurs have the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever. They could potentially return the Atlanta Hawks' original assets back to them in a trade for Trae Young. The problem with Trae Young in Atlanta throughout his entire career is his defensive efficiency. Since Trae Young was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks in 2018, the Hawks have never been better than 18th in defensive efficiency. They were so desperate to fix this problem that they traded Danilo Gallinari, 3 first-round picks, and a pick swap in order to get DeJounte Murray.
Sending gift cards in bulk.
Well, wait, just to get I can't talk. DeJounte Murray.
The philosophy was simple. All Trae Young needed was a defensive-minded guard to share the backcourt with him, and the Atlanta Hawks' defensive rating could improve. But the craziest part of all is that the 2021 Atlanta Hawks ranked 21st in the NBA in defensive rating and 8th in the NBA in offensive rating. The 2022 Atlanta Hawks were 26th in the NBA in defensive rating, but 2nd in the NBA in offensive rating. Now the 2023 Atlanta Hawks, year one of DeJounte Murray, still ranked 22nd in the NBA in defensive rating and 7th in the NBA in offensive rating. And this latest iteration of the Atlanta Hawks somehow got even worse, 27th in the NBA in defensive rating and 12th in the NBA.
Nah, for real though.
NBA in offensive rating. So clearly the DeJounte Murray trade didn't work out, and now this team has significantly less assets and can essentially get extorted by the team that traded them DeJounte Murray to begin with. So what the Atlanta Hawks could receive in a potential trade with the San Antonio Spurs is 2 lottery picks from this year's NBA draft, but they could also regain control of their own draft picks from 2025 to 2027. But the question is would the San Antonio Spurs do that, especially if the Atlanta Hawks are in the midst of a rebuild? To get Trae Young and to not waste a year of Victor Wembanyama, possibly. It would give the Atlanta Hawks an opportunity to rebuild and move on from the Trae Young era, as opposed to consistently competing with mediocre rosters.
Trae Young era is crazy. What's the farthest the Hawks win in the playoffs? I want to know.
And meanwhile, the Hawks could also do the entire
Wild Trae Young was that. Let me put that in. Wild Trae Young was
NBA a huge service, trading Trae Young to the Spurs to pair with Victor Wembanyama. Now I know what Atlanta Hawks fans might say. Mike, the reason why we sucked this past year was because Trae Young only played in 54 games. If he wasn't injured, we would have made it into the playoffs. And to be honest, that could be true, especially when you take a look at how weak the Eastern Conference is. There's no question about it. There may have been a chance that the Atlanta Hawks could have been an 8th seed or a 9th seed, but regardless, they probably still would have been a first round exit. The Atlanta Hawks team that was able to make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals is long gone, and they've
they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Why didn't I know that?
struggled to improve.
I'm lying. I'm just starting to watch basketball. I'm just starting to get back into it. And my bad, I'm stuttering. These motherfucking peppers is hot as hell. I need another water. God damn.
Ever since. And even furthermore, Trae is actually a huge part of that problem. I mean, take a look at the Atlanta Hawks whenever Trae Young played versus when Trae Young didn't play. The major differences here is DeJounte Murray scores a lot more points and defenses score a lot less points. When you take into consideration that DeJounte Murray is on one of the best contracts in the entire NBA, being signed to a contract that literally pays him $30 million a year annually, which is almost half of the max contract that could be offered to free agents this offseason. And you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but you have to agree with the fact that the DeJounte Murray Trae Young backcourt just simply looked disjointed at times.
بدك تعمل شو خاص بالتجارة الإلكترونية.
You trying to say DeJounte Murray need to just take over?
Now don't get me wrong, there are times where Trae Young and DeJounte Murray look like the next up-and-coming backcourt in the NBA. For example, when they combined for 83 points against the Houston Rockets, or when they dropped 72 points against the lowly Washington Wizards on New Year's Eve this past season. It's just been very inconsistent, and I believe Trae Young's defense has really held this team back consistently. The real issue here is Atlanta's management thinking that the backcourt duo was going to be good enough to have them compete in the first place. With Bogdanovich, Jalen Johnson, and Clint Capella, did this really sound like a team
Yeah, the first nigga he just said just not just
that could compete in the East? Not necessarily. So in my first scenario, the Atlanta Hawks draft Zachary Wissache, which is a player that I believe could fit on any team realistically. A strong two-way small forward that plays the prototypical 3-and-D that I'm expecting to turn into a high-end role player, because at the end of the day, this draft isn't necessarily known for having superstar level talent like last year. But if you've been watching this video up until this point, and you've been a long-time subscriber of this channel, channel, I'd expect you to ask me one thing.
Mike, does it make sense for the Atlanta Hawks to trade Trae Young in this scenario?
I mean, take a few steps back. In the most simplistic way of looking at the Atlanta Hawks situation, one could assume that if you're trading your superstar player, then wouldn't you be getting significantly weaker? Trae Young is responsible for most of the Atlanta Hawks offense. And while I did show you a cute graphic earlier on how much DeJounte Murray improves once Trae Young goes down, there's a legitimate argument to be made for moving on from a player that averages 37% from 3 and 26 points per game with 11 assists per game. A player that has 4.6 win shares this past year and a PER of 20.3. A player who is one of the most incredible offensive talents in the NBA during the 2021 to 2022 season at least, although recently his offensive box plus minus, which is a box score estimate of the offensive points per 100 possessions that a player contributes above a league average player, translated to an average team, has dwindled all the way to a 4.9 this past year. Don't get me wrong, Trae Young is still a very, very good player, but as you saw with the Phoenix Suns this past year, building a successful basketball team has a lot more to do than just getting a bunch of talented players on one team and telling them to play basketball, and I believe that's where the fundamental problem is with the Atlanta Hawks. It's not the fact that Trae Young's a bad basketball player, because he's one of the best talents in the entire NBA. It's not the fact that DeJounte Murray is a bad player either and he just magically forgot how to play defense. It's the fundamental fit between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray that's in question here. If we were in a situation where trading Trae Young necessarily meant that the Hawks would get worse, then I would say you can't trade him at this point, especially when you don't have control of
This guy reading the script, fam. This is a great video. Matter of fact, let me subscribe. Damn, I'm already subscribed.
your own NBA draft picks. But the thing that makes this situation so unique and so interesting is we have empirical data from this past season that it wouldn't really make much of a difference at all if the Hawks did trade Trae Young. You're essentially paying a player $43 million a year to be the same team with him on your roster and without him on your roster. But for some reason, there's a huge demand for that player, primarily because he's young, is an all-star, and hasn't even hit his prime yet. So in this particular case, the Trae Young rumors have never been more legitimate, and the Atlanta Hawks have a huge decision to make on Trae Young. So if you're a Hawks fan, I want you guys to let me know in the comment section down below. Should the Atlanta Hawks trade Trae Young? Should they keep him and build around him with the #1 overall pick? Maybe Zachary Rissache is the player that they need to slide next to DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. Maybe his defense can make all the difference for this young team. I like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.